What's up? Welcome to Nowstalgia. Dave here with a review of A Quiet Place Day 1, starring Lupita Nyong'o and Joseph Quinn. This is the first A Quiet Place prequel, of course following up A Quiet Place from 2018 and A Quiet Place Part 2 from 2021. The franchise spawned from, of course, John Krasinski's creative mind, who wrote and directed the first two films. Krasinski still has a story by credit for Day 1, but now the directing and screenplay duties fall to Michael Sarnoski, following up his film Pig with Nicolas Cage, which was a movie I liked quite a bit. Quiet Place Day 1 is a really effective prequel in the sense that it's very self-contained, very much need no further knowledge of the first two Quiet Place movies to understand the film. It is a bit different than those movies. This kind of leans into monster science fiction film, albeit of the moodier, more pathos-leaning side of things due to Michael Sarnoski's touch at the helm. It's not really that scary per se. A lot of it takes place in the daylight. I think that's a big factor. But it is kind of interestingly drawn in the sense that it's not trying to show you the true day one, like this is how things happened and everything went to shit. It's really centered on Lupita Nyong'o's character Sam. And the beginning of the apocalypse, in a sense, presents Sam with an opportunity to briefly connect with her lost life as everything else falls to the wayside in society. Sam meets Joseph Quinn's Eric, who ends up helping her on her quest. Top tier movie Cat. Sam's cat has a lot of screen time, very much a part of the story and the plot. Pretty cool. You do get Jamin Hanshu in the film as well, who was in Quiet Place Part 2, but it's a very small role. There are some clever elements with the storytelling, namely how characters will use the weather, such as rain and thunder, to mask their sound and of course, hide from the monsters. And, these films have to work in a certain way because, of course, the whole conceit is that if you talk, you die. Doing that in a urban setting, this movie takes place in New York City, very much different from the country setting of the first two Quiet Place films. So there's a lot of, I think, changes to, like, the vibe, even if it's still quite familiar to a Quiet Place viewer. In the end, I don't think there's a dynamite set piece to the film. It's pretty lean. It's only like an hour and 40 minutes long. Maybe it could have used some kind of big wow per se, but ultimately nothing really surprised. But it's still pretty effective, pretty tight for what it is. And I think that's pretty good for a prequel. Yes, like, did you need a prequel to A Quiet Place? No. On the other hand, it's pretty ripe to just kind of make one. This has been a pretty solid and strongly performing franchise. A Quiet Place Part 2 ended up being a pretty good hit despite being released in the pandemic box office, so I don't really begrudge them for making the film, and I think Sarnoski actually ends up being a pretty good fit for this type of story, grounded around Sam's character specifically. You can definitely draw some similarities to Pig in terms of the movie almost subverting audience expectations and what it ends up being about, what it ends up showing you. So I guess it's a bit interesting in that regard. The movie wasn't actually filmed in New York, but I think the sound stages they did use, as well as like London backdrops and stuff, it looks pretty credible. And in general, I'm just kind of in the bag for like seeing apocalyptic city situations, and especially the beginning of an apocalypse. So even though that's not really what this is about, things just kind of happen pretty quickly and you're kind of off to the races per se. I think the table setting of the beginning of the movie works pretty well. And I guess the only other thing that kind of factors in is, of course, because sound is so important to survival in the story, there's not a lot of dialogue in A Quiet Place Day 1, not dissimilar to the past films, but I think that really means you have to communicate atmosphere and you have to communicate tone in a really effective way, and I think Nyong'o does a really good job of conveying what Sam is feeling and what her motivations are, even when she doesn't get to speak a whole lot. She does get to kind of establish her character in the beginning of the film when she is able to speak before everything goes to shit, of course. So I think that does help. And she's definitely a more well-rounded character than Quinn's Eric. But I think Quinn, this is the first big role from him post Stranger Things the past season. And he does really well. I think he plays off Nyong'o quite well, which is no small feat, of course. She's one of our great actresses. And even though he's kind of very much in support of her, he only has, I think, one extended scene where he goes to get her meds where he's basically alone. Like, for the most part, it's a two-hander the whole time. But Quinn does pretty well, and of course, I'm looking forward to seeing him in the Fantastic Four. We know he's been officially cast as Johnny Storm. And I'm happy to see that the box office is looking pretty solid for Quiet Place Day 1, as the summer box office has really come to life thanks to Inside Out 2, and it's going to continue with Despicable Me 4 and Twisters tracking well, and of course Deadpool and Wolverine. So the movie industry seemingly is saved once again, when we like to see that. Let me know, what did you think of A Quiet Place Day 1? Did you like it more or less than the previous films? Did you get hung up on some of those differences? What did you think of it as a prequel? Let me know. And for more movie reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.